Happy Monday. You know what that means. It's time to talk about that box office with Mr. Dan Murrell. And let's look at those charts because Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise comes in and shows that he's still got star power with
That's
a
right.
franchise best.
Mission Impossible Fallout debuted #1 as expected with a domestic franchise high, $61.2 million. This is about in line with what the estimates were tracking going into the weekend. Didn't exceed them, but it didn't underperform either. It's almost exactly where they were thinking it was going to come in. It also set a franchise high record debut overseas. It made $155 million worldwide, which is the most for any Mission Impossible movie on its first weekend worldwide. And the thing that they are liking, if you're Paramount, is that it has yet to open in a lot of key markets. That includes Japan. That includes a lot of the European markets, including France, where the movie is largely set. That includes Australia, and it includes China, where it did not have a release date until last week. It has a release date of August 31st in China. So, did perform within expectations here in the U.S. It did really well overseas, and then again, if you're Paramount, you're also looking at some of its best markets still ahead of it. So a good start for the movie, I think. A solid start domestically and really good start worldwide for that franchise.
And good news, we talked about this a little bit. Paramount's certainly happy. We've talked a little bit about Paramount in terms of what they need. They've got Mission, they've got Transformers, they need some wins. And this is a franchise best, so not a loss at all. Some people were kind of calling this a disappointment. When you look at the history of Mission Impossible, it's certainly not.
Yeah, and we'll look at it kind of more in the context of the past films, but I think a lot of people were looking at it, and I was reading something about, they felt like it was under a lot of pressure because the shutdown forced Tom Cruise's injury forced an 8-week shutdown to the film.
Which cost them a lot of money.
Which cost a lot of money. However, a lot of that is covered by insurance, which is why you have insurance on your big movie stars. And then, this was a very expensive film, as all of these are, but it is on track to perform the best globally of any of them. So I would say to people that are saying that, like, maybe it didn't do well, it did, again, it's all about how it performs in the weeks going ahead, but a solid start domestically and a great start internationally. So let's look at how it does in the weeks ahead.
Let's look at those legs.
Yes.
I don't know if it counts if I say it. You guys have to decide for yourselves. But, here's the other interesting thing about Mission as a franchise. This is great word of mouth. I actually haven't seen it yet, but I hear wonderful things. Yes, from yourself included. Tom Cruise, I feel like over the last 15 years, we continue to have this debate about the idea of star power, both domestically and internationally. And we've largely landed on for about 10 years that franchises have power, characters have power more than stars do these days. That said, and Mission's always been a really good franchise for Tom Cruise, and we'll look at his openings. I don't think it's the same franchise without him. You know what I mean? I really think it's the marriage of the two.
I agree, but also let's look at Tom Cruise's openings as far as domestic goes, because I also don't think he's quite the same without this franchise.
He isn't. They need each other.
These are the top 5 domestic Tom Cruise openings. Fallout comes in just behind War of the Worlds for his second best, and then 3, 4, 5, a different combination of Mission Impossible movies. 2 quick notes. Number 1, a lot of people might say, where does Ghost Protocol, which I believe was one of the big global breakout hits for this franchise, and a lot of people when they look at these opening weekend numbers, they're saying, where's Ghost Protocol? An important thing to keep in mind is that Ghost Protocol, the 4th Mission Impossible movie, opened IMAX only in its first weekend. It opened in about 400 IMAX theaters for an exclusive engagement its first weekend, then went wide to other theaters the next weekend, which happened to be Christmas. So that's why you're not seeing Ghost Protocol show up on a lot of these Mission Impossible charts, is that it made about $12 million in an IMAX-only engagement its first week, and then about another, the next week is where it gets weird because it's Christmas, it's 4 days, it's Christmas Eve, the 3-day is way smaller than the 4 or 5 days, so that's where it makes comparing a little bit difficult. But that's why Ghost Protocol isn't on any of these charts, because they rolled it out differently. And also, looking at Tom Cruise, if you look in the past decade, the last 10 years, the only movies that have made $100+ million domestically starring Tom Cruise have been the last 3 Mission Impossible movies and Edge of Tomorrow, which was still considered to be a box office disappointment.
Yes, it was. Until over time they looked at Home.
Right, exactly. It was one of those films that did not, immediately turn a profit and was kind of considered to be a bit of a ding in that it was supposed to be a big summer blockbuster, and it just inched over that $100 million mark.
Which is a shame because it's so good.
So I agree that Mission Impossible is Tom Cruise in a way that not many franchises are. The James Bond franchise adapts to whoever's James Bond at that time. Yeah. I don't know what this franchise would be without Tom Cruise. But at the same time, I think that Tom Cruise needs this franchise because it sort of reestablishes him as a huge box office star every few years, where a lot of his other movies have not been doing that. The Jack Reacher series, those two movies, they did okay. They did fine, but they did not have the breakout hits that any of the other ones did. The Mummy, obviously, last summer, not a big hit, a bit of an embarrassment, really, as far as launching a franchise off of his back. So I would say that in a way, they both need each other at this point.
Well, as he cuts into his 60th year.
God, it's crazy.
It's insane. But he's seen, I think you can track sort of the trajectory of this industry for the last 60 years or the 40 through Tom Cruise's career. And there was a point where the star power was a reality for him, and he opened movies. But that's just not the world we're in anymore, and so I'm with you. They need each other, and it allows him to do some of these smaller and, to me, equally interesting. I liked Edge of Tomorrow a lot. Films, and allow them to accumulate profit over time.
Yeah.
And we are going to see a second one of those.
Speaking of profit over time.
Mamma Mia.
Oh, no, I was going to say...
I jumped the shark.
Again, well, that's later in the show. When we have a franchise that has been opening entries over many, many years, a lot of people say, well, how can you really compare them? And we get to do my favorite thing, Roth.
Oh, good.
Which is adjust for inflation.
Let's do it.
So let's look at the Mission Impossible series adjusted for inflation. And when you do that, Fallout still falls right in the middle. Mission Impossible 2 is by far the biggest opener in the series, followed by the original Mission Impossible back in 1996. So Fallout is holding consistent. And that's the one thing you'll notice, Roth, whenever we've done box office analysis on this series leading up, I talk about how consistent Mission Impossible has been. Now, I think that's a double-edged sword. It's both good and bad in the sense that there has not been, in the kind of new iteration of Mission Impossible movies, 3 and on, there has not been one that has really underperformed to a significant degree, but there also hasn't been one that has overperformed to a significant degree. They haven't had their
Fast and the Furious 5
They
moment.
have not had their Fast 5 moment, and if you look at those numbers, Fallout is falling right in line with Rogue Nation, with Mission Impossible 3. They average around $200 million domestic. Now, where they're looking for the breakout here is this going to be the one that breaks out even more on a global scale? And I think that really, more than the domestic picture, is where we're going to look at what Fallout does in the weeks ahead, because I think they've realized that these movies have hit a ceiling here domestically, which is why, starting really with Ghost Protocol, you've seen these movies really take a turn toward the international. Of course, Ghost Protocol in Dubai with the Burj Khalifa. Rogue Nation was very much a globe-hopping movie, and this movie set largely in France, set all over the world. I think they realized that this is a global play for them in the same way that the Fast and the Furious movies have realized this is a global play.
Well, they sort of did that trajectory in a very smart way. Fast and the Furious, I know we disagree on the franchise merits itself. That said, Mission Impossible, it's interesting because our own little Spencer Gilbert came in and just was also equally impressed with the movie. That said, that little rapscallion Tom Cruise will just do anything. He'll jump into anything. So I am curious, as this thing moves forward and he does go into his 60s, if the cost of the injury on this one will change. One of the biggest draws for this franchise is, will they let him keep doing completely insane things as a part of it? I don't think he's willing to let that go. So we'll see how that
it does.
unfolds. But now, can I sing?
You can sing.
Mamma Mia did really well. You liked the second one a lot in terms of it was good. But it did not do all that well financially.
Yeah, it opened well last week, but it fell 57% in week 2. That is more like a superhero film than what you would traditionally expect to be a female skewing musical. Generally,
I'm not sure that my song really worked.
That's all right. It was a lovely song.
Thank you.
But people were expecting Mamma Mia to have legs, sort of like Book Club did earlier this summer. 57% is a really hefty drop. It's still outperformed the number one movie last week, The Equalizer, which we'll talk about in a second. But looking at the numbers stacking up to the first Mamma Mia film, it opened higher, but the daily numbers for the last week have started skewing toward Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia did better in its second weekend than this one has done. So this is looking front-loaded. It's looking like it opened higher than the first Mamma Mia film. However, it's losing that ground. So I would not be surprised if Mamma Mia, I think it's still going to go over $100 million, but I would not be surprised if it ends up with a lower gross than the first Mamma Mia.
It's an interesting thing because it was pleasing in terms of people enjoyed the film, but then I'm curious about the drop off. And do you think that it was just the fact that it was going now against Mission, which is just a much clearer, big summer blockbuster movie action film?
There is an X factor. Because Equalizer 2, which fell from first place to third place, dropped 61%, which you could say, well, it had direct competition from Mission Impossible Fallout as far as the action genre. There's a longer-term question here that we're going to have to see. Maybe this has something to do with it. Maybe this has nothing to do with it, which is that MoviePass was down for most of this weekend. So the question now going forward, and this will test the real strength of MoviePass in the theatrical market, is were these downturns in the second weeks of these movies due to the fact that there was no MoviePass, or was it just that there was competition, that they were sequels, that they had front-loaded fan bases? You cannot make any conclusions. I've already seen, again, as happens every time, I've already seen articles saying this and such is due to MoviePass. Mission Impossible didn't do as well as it did because of MoviePass. There's no way to know that. There's no way to know that at this point. I will, however, be keeping a very close eye on how things hold up, how things drop. You know, this whole summer we've been talking about things holding well. Movies overperforming or outperforming or having great legs or having a great sustainability. Let's see now, and it'll be tough because we're going out of the summer movie season, so there's no more one-to-one comparisons. What happens? Because we know that a lot of people did use MoviePass, but now it is how many of those people, when that was not an option, opted to still go to the movies?
It is an interesting question because Mamma Mia 2, for me, is a movie, even with a recommendation from someone I trust, is a movie that I wouldn't necessarily want to pay entirely out of pocket for to see, because I wasn't hugely impressed with the first film. The people that loved the first film, like our own Roxy Stryer, said that this one wasn't as good. So I'm wondering if there's just sort of a disconnect.
Roxy's on opposite day. I'm sorry. The first, I did not like the first film at all.
Neither
she
did
loved
I.
the first film.
Yeah.
I really liked the second movie. She thought the first one was better. So we are like two opposing magnets.
But it is an interesting and relatively. I thought I was a little saddened by the drop off because I thought it had a window in terms of it was appealing to an audience that a lot of these other films weren't hitting. Hotel Transylvania 3 and Teen Titans Go. That's families. That's kids. Equalizer and Mission is big summer action, and it just had this window. It had this lane open to it. So I'm surprised.
And it's possible maybe it just opened a little. Maybe there was just a heavier than expected surge. And next week maybe it drops 25-30% more in line with what we're expecting. But that's a much steeper drop than I would have guessed for Mamma Mia. So that's one that we're looking. You mentioned Teen Titans Go.
Yeah, which was I thought it was a cute little movie, but I think it's a very difficult translation from a TV show, a little scene TV show, relatively minor TV show, to the big screen version of it.
Yeah, it debuted at $10.4 million. It had a budget of $10 million. That's okay. It's going to need to hold pretty well. This is the kind of movie that's going to get profitability. And as you mentioned, it's tied into a TV show, a popular TV show as well. It's got a very rabid fan base.
Yes, it does.
So this is the kind of film that's going to go into profitability. One, pushing the franchise in general. Two, in home distribution. It's a low budget animated thing. I'm sure they probably would have liked for it to premiere a little higher. It does make 14 weeks in a row that there's been a superhero film in the box office top 5. The last weekend that there wasn't one was April 20th, when A Quiet Place, week 3, led the box office. And there has been a superhero film 22 of the 30 weekends in 2018 in the top 5.
That sounds like 2018 to me.
Like 2018.
Teen Titans Go, as you say, has a very a devoted fan base.
It does.
But it's interesting to watch why they turn that into a feature film is a curiosity to me.
Yeah.
Unless, in a sense, that this movie release is a part of a larger lensing and almost like a marketing tool to drive people to the DC streaming service over time.
That's what I think it was.
I think so too.
I believe that
kind of smart.
If you watch the film, obviously one of DC's first live action series that they're pushing has been the much discussed Titans.
Yes.
With F Batman, a very different version of Robin than in this version. Teen Titans Go, obviously, a continuing series.
It's super cute, by the way.
And there is, if you stay into the credits of Teen Titans Go, a teaser of the potential pushing or return of another iteration of that franchise. So I agree. I think this is probably a concerted effort on the part of Warner Brothers saying, we're going to really try to push the Titans brand, and the theatrical release of Teen Titans Go was just one arm of that.
And I think it's pretty smart because, as you say, it doesn't, with the budget that it had, it actually doesn't have to blow the, it doesn't have to do Incredibles money in order to make its budget back and even a little profit for them. And it does a good job of advertising their streaming service to a potential audience. And by the way, even if you haven't watched the series, I think the movie works.
Yeah.
That said, top per screen.
Top per screen was one screen here in Los Angeles at the ArcLight. It's a documentary called Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood. It made $30,000 on just the one screen. It is a documentary. It's about he's now an elderly man named Scotty Bowers, who for decades was known as the guy that you went to if you needed to get into a little trouble off the grid. Basically, it harkens back to a time in the classic era of Hollywood, the 40s, 50s, 60s, even into the 70s and 80s, where stars who were largely closeted could not have that aspect of themselves open to the public, and he provided a place and oftentimes himself as an outlet for that. So it's sort of I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list, but the materials that I've seen, it's like it's not a seedy. It's not painting it as kind of a seedy, seamy underbelly of Hollywood, but more kind of a profile of this man who basically said you don't have to hide who you are. Some people call him the pimp to the stars. I mean, I'm sure it all depends on how you view it.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a topic that has a dark underbelly in the sense of it was a climate where your livelihood was threatened if certain aspects of your personality came to light. But it's something that I haven't seen it. I want to see it. Kind of a look back at I would say a bygone era, but I think in many ways that kind of thing happens more today than we'd like to.
Yeah,
admit, so.
I don't think I think it's better. There's still work to do.
Yeah.
It's not as bygone, perhaps, as we would like it to be.
Exactly.
Mamma Mia maybe had a sad drop this week, but it still made its way onto the summer movie report.
It danced onto the summer movie chart. Number 9 jumps over Book Club. The First Purge, as we mentioned last week, had a nice little week in the sun. It's dropped off at number 10. Book Club, our beloved book club, which has been with us since almost the beginning of the summer, will be exiting the chart next week in favor of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. But it's been a fun summer with Book Club. I love that movie stuck around into what will be August. So C'est la vie, Book Club, and hello, Mission Impossible next week. And now we're getting down to the nitty gritty as far as what will the top 10 of the summer be.
Is that shark going to make its way on?
Is the Meg going to swim its way on? Is Christopher Robin going to bring Pooh Bear into the top 10? That's what opens this week. Is he going to charm his way? Are we going to see a movie like Crazy Rich Asians, which opens in August?
Yeah.
There's been a little bit of buzz around that. Is that going to be a movie that becomes a breakout hit in the vein of Girls Trip or Bridesmaids have in summers past? That surprises a lot of people. This is where we're getting down to it, where the number of films that could make that list are getting very small, and we'll just have to see what sticks.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the interesting things about Christopher Robin is that, typically speaking, and this is certainly no secret, Disney screens movies for critics almost 2 weeks weeks before it's released and allows you to review. Not so in this case.
No.
I think it's the day before.
The
day before it opens. So that's
out of character for Disney.
That's out of character. We won't say what it means just yet because we haven't seen it.
Who knows?
I'm hearing some very good buzz on Crazy Rich Asians. On the other hand,
it's been building a lot of buzz.
Ocean's 8 eclipses Ready Player One.
Ocean's 8
on the domestic chart
jumps to number 9 on the domestic chart. It is now over Ready Player One. The rest of the top 8 stay the same. Ant-Man and the Wasp gunning for that number 7 spot. But as you can see, Black Panther, we mentioned last week, Roth, that Black Panther had picked up a lot of theaters, I think in an attempt to get it over the $700 million mark. It had about a 90% drop in business this weekend. It dropped down to about, I think, $9,000. So it looks like Disney made one last push. It dropped almost all of the additional screens that it added last weekend. So I don't know how much longer, but look at it, $46,000 away. They just about cut it in half.
Yeah.
They're digging in the couch cushions at this point.
Yeah.
They want to get that extra $46,000 to get Black Panther over the $700 million mark. Will they be able to do it? I think they will, because I predict that they're going to put it back into theaters before the end of the year.
I think so too, because I think that they're probably going to do a campaign for Oscar for whatever they're campaigning for is TBD, but I think they'll do an Oscar campaign that's going to bring it back into theaters, and that's going to bring that right back up.
I think so too.
Worldwide, unlikely remake you found.
Yes, it's
Yoda,
not on this chart. Yes, unlikely remake you found. Yes, it's not on this chart, but as you'll see, Dying to Survive, which is the Chinese film that we've been talking about the last few weeks, jumps over Rampage to the number 9 spot. Incredibles 2, as we sit and talk here right now today, has probably earned over $1 billion. That'll be over on next week's chart. We'll tick that up. The 4th 2018 film to make $1 billion, and the 3rd for Disney. Whew, that's insane. But yes, I found a movie. This seems like a Mad Lib. There's a movie that opened at number 1 in China this past weekend to $131 million, because they opened to crazy massive numbers in China so often, these films. It's called Hello, Mr. Billionaire, and it is a Chinese remake of Brewster's Millions, which, if you don't know Brewster's Millions,
from 1985.
It's a 1985 Richard Pryor film. So
it's such a weird movie to remake all of a sudden.
In China.
It's
a weird movie to remake in America.
But I really want to see it. What that's done is I am now dying to see this film.
So congratulations, Brewster's Millions.
Yeah.
Who knew that 30 plus years later you could open to 130? Hello, Mr. Billionaire, the Brewster's Millions remake. We'll see if it has enough steam to jump into the top 10. But yeah, that was I read about. I try to keep up on the Chinese box office every week, and I read it this week, and I was like, Chinese remake of Brewster's Millions opens to $131 million. Like, that's just
bizarre. Those kinds of things make me very happy. Incredibles 2, I got to say, we were having this conversation in the office earlier where it's one of those moments where you go, even though we predicted it would make $1 billion, it still is staggering to think about.
And it's rare. It's very rare for an animated film to make $1 billion. Minions did it. There's a couple of Frozen. There's a couple other Pixar movies that have done it. It is fueled largely by the U.S. box office, over 50%, which is rare for $1 billion grosser. But yeah, it is. We knew it would make a lot of money, but it has made a lot.
Speaking of streaming services, there's no better advertising for Disney if they say there's going to be a TV series. We shall see.
I agree. Incredibles TV series.
I'm both happy and sad.
There's only 2 more of these left, Roth.
There's only so long that we can still anticipate the Meg, which I fear is going to have been the best part of the Meg.
I do too, but we'll see. This is our last week in double digits because, Roth,
11
we're 11 days away from the Meg. We're so close.
Oh, please don't disappoint me, you beautiful prehistoric shark. Like, I just really want it to be everything I need it to be. I feel so invested in this film, Dan.
How long have we been? Since May,
Months.
I think we've been counting this down, and here we are. We're a mere 11 days away from the Megalodon.
The Megalodon is upon us. That beautiful, beautiful Meg enters into this worldwide screens in my heart in 11 days.
11 days. That's all I got, Ross. Those are all my charts.
Those are the charts. That is the box office. You let us know what you think in the comments below. How high is your anticipation for the Meg? We'll see you next week.